Wind off the Missouri, frost on the wagon ruts, a frontier town crouched between the pines and the ridge smoke, rising from 100 chimneys that do not know what is coming. At the edge of the main street, a widow kneels in the mud. Her hands are cold. Her last coin is warm. She presses it into her daughter's palm the way a woman presses a secret into a door she is closing forever. Above her, a shadow, not passing, stopping, settling. The biggest man the town has ever seen is taking off his hat. He has come 3 years for this moment, and somewhere 300 miles east in a Chicago office lined with mahogany, another man is looking at a map, waiting. He has waited long enough. The mud was frozen at the edges and softer in the middle, where the boots of 100 passing strangers had churned it into something the January cold could not quite finish. Prudence Ashfield knelt in it anyway. Her skirt was not the point. The coin was the point. It was a 2-cent piece, worn thin at the eagle's wing, warm from her palm, because she had been holding it since she left the house. She pressed it into Hattie's hand and closed her daughter's fingers around it one by one. Hattie was 12. Hattie did not look at the coin. Hattie looked at her mother's face. "Buy the flour," Prudence said. "Not the good kind, the other. I know which kind. And bring the change home." "I know." There was no change coming. Prudence knew it. Hattie knew it. But the two of them had a way of saying things to each other that were not about the words. The words were the fence around the meaning. The meaning stayed inside where nobody else could see it. Hattie left without another word. Because she was 12 and already understood what it cost her mother to kneel in the mud in front of the general store where the whole street could watch. Prudence stayed on her knees a beat longer than she meant to. Her back ached. Her hands were cold through her gloves. The wind off the Missouri had opinions about her coat, and none of them were favorable. That was when the shadow fell. It did not fall the way a shadow falls when someone is passing through. It stopped. It settled. It took up a great deal of the light. She looked up. The biggest man she had ever seen in her life was taking off his hat. I was not handsome. That was the first thing her mind registered because her mind, which had been trained through 36 hard years to catalog what was in front of her before deciding what to do about it, always registered the first thing first. He was weathered. His jaw was hard. His shoulders filled a coat that would have fit 2 ordinary men at once. He had a scar above one eyebrow, pale and old. But he was not looking at her the way people looked at her. People looked past her. People looked at her medicine bag and not her face. People looked at the widow's black she had stopped wearing 3 years ago and still somehow saw anyway. This man was looking at her, all of her mud-caked knees and her cold red hands and her eyes that had learned not to expect much. "Mrs. Ashfield." His voice was low, not gentle, steady, the kind of voice that did not need to raise itself because it had never needed to. She got to her feet. She did not accept the hand he offered. She did not think about the hand at all. She thought about the fact that he knew her name and had spoken it like he had been rehearsing it. "You have me at a disadvantage, sir. Fletcher Rowntree, ma'am. The ranch above Black Elk Pass. You've heard of me. Cottonwood Bluff has heard of you. That is not the same." Something moved at the corner of his mouth. Not a smile. Something a step short of one. He turned his hat in his hands. Once, then again. "I've come to ask you something," he said. "And I've been standing across this street for the better part of an hour, trying to figure out how a man like me asks a woman like you a question like this one without making a fool of himself first. Did you figure it out? No, ma'am. Then perhaps you should not ask. I'm going to ask anyway." She looked at him. He was serious. He was so serious it made her want to laugh, because a man of his size standing in the mud with his hat in his hands, looking at her like she was a decision he had already made, was not something Cottonwood Bluff had prepared her for. "Well then." He drew a breath. It was a considerable breath. It seemed to gather itself in his chest before he let it out. "I choose you, ma'am." 4 words. The wind kept moving. A wagon passed behind him. Somewhere a child called a dog. The world did not stop for 4 words. The world never stops for 4 words. It only feels that way inside the person hearing them. Prudence felt her hands close on nothing. "Mr. Rowntree." "Fletcher." "Mr. Rowntree, I do not know you." No, ma'am. You do not know me. I have known you for 3 years, from a distance, which is not the same, I understand, but not nothing. 3 years. Since the sickness took Doc Withers and half the North Road. You came out to the Kellerman place in the middle of the night in December. Their boy had the croup so bad his lips were going blue. You were there before sunup with a poultice and no shoes on because you had not stopped to find them. I was hauling timber past that road at first light. I saw you leaving. She did not remember seeing him. She had seen many faces in 3 years. None of them had stayed. That was a long time ago. I remember it clear. Mr. Roundtree, you have been carrying this town on your back, ma'am. Nobody in Cottonwood Bluff has had the decency to notice. I noticed. I have been noticing for 3 years. And I have come to ask you something nobody has had the decency to ask, which is, whether you will let me build you a house. The word house did something to her chest that she did not have permission for. She locked it down. I have a house. You have a room behind the doctor's old office. It is mine. It is a room. I am talking about a house. On my ranch. Big kitchen. Room for the children. A porch that looks east, so the sun comes up over the pass and comes in through the window before you are even out of bed. Mr. Roundtree, I am not finished. Yes, you are. He stopped. He looked at her, and something in his face went very still. Not offended, recognizing. Yes, ma'am, I am. Good day, Mr. Roundtree. She walked past him. She walked past him the way she walked past everything that could not be permitted to matter. Her back straight, her chin level, her hands folded at her waist so nobody in Cottonwood Bluff could see they were shaking. He did not follow her. Grateful, so grateful, because if he had followed her, she would have had to say something and she did not know what she would have said. And she had learned long ago that a woman in her circumstances could not afford to say anything she had not decided in advance. She got home before Hattie did. She always did. Hattie moved through Cottonwood Bluff like a small, careful animal that had decided the world was not a friendly place and had made peace with the arrangement. The house was cold. It was always cold in January. Prudence took off her coat. She hung it on the peg by the door. She walked to the corner where the floorboard was loose and knelt down again. Twice in one morning. Her knees would remember it tomorrow. She lifted the board. The jar was where she had left it. 3 inches of glass, a red twist of ribbon around the neck because Nathaniel had put it there 5.5 years ago when the jar was new and she had never taken it off. She poured the coins onto her lap. $23.84. She knew before she counted. She counted anyway, because there was something the counting did that she had come to need. Every coin in the jar was a coin she had said no to, a dress she had not bought, a better cut of meat, boots for herself when the ones she had were still functional even if the sole had a crack. Every coin was a small, hard refusal. The jar was what stood between her children and the road. She had not told anyone about it. Not the Reverend. Not Martha at the general store. Not Hattie, though Hattie knew because Hattie knew everything and simply did not mention what she was not meant to mention. $23.84. Not enough to leave Cottonwood Bluff, but enough to buy tickets on the Northern Pacific if she had to 3 fares east to her sister in Ohio and something left over for 1 meal on the train. She had been putting coins in the jar since the November after Nathaniel died, because a woman who had learned that a good man could catch a fever on a Tuesday and be gone by the next Saturday was a woman who did not intend to be caught without a plan. She dropped the 2-cent piece from her pocket into the jar. She had not spent the last coin. She had put the last coin in Hattie's hand for show because a girl of 12 needed to believe her mother could send her for flour without the world coming to an end. But the last coin was still hers. The jar accepted it. $23.86. She put the board back. She stood up. Her knees popped. She was not going to think about Fletcher Rowntree. She thought about him anyway. I choose you, ma'am. 4 words. Which 4 words a man does not say to a woman in a mud street unless he means them or unless he is the worst kind of fool. And he did not have the face of a fool. He had the face of a man who had decided something a long time before he said it. Except. Except she was 36 years old. She had 2 children. She had a room and a jar and a table and a healing bag. She had a husband in the ground 5 years and a life she had built board by board with her own hands and no help from anyone. Except a man like that did not want a woman like her. Men like that wanted the widow McAllister, who was 31 and childless and had inherited her husband's mercantile. Men like that wanted the girl from the schoolhouse who blushed when the bell rang. Except Hattie came in through the back. She had the flour, she had the change, which meant the flour had cost less than Prudence had budgeted, which meant Hattie had gone to the second general store and paid the older price, which meant Hattie had walked a long way around to save 2 cents. Prudence took the flour. She took the change. She did not comment on any of it. "Wash up," she said. "I will start the biscuits." Hattie washed. Prudence started the biscuits. And by the time Jedediah came thundering through the front door, red-faced from running with mud on his boots and a mouse in his pocket, that he was pretending nobody knew about, the healing room was warm and the biscuits were rising, and Prudence Ashfield had decided that whatever had happened in the mud street had not happened. Deciding things had not happened was a skill she had learned early. Less useful she would discover than she thought. Fletcher Roundtree came back on Tuesday. She saw the wagon before she saw him. Because in Cottonwood Bluff, a wagon that big driven, that slow with a small figure on the seat beside a very large one, was not the sort of wagon that passed unnoticed. She was in the healing room. She had a patient. Old Mrs. Duffield, who had come in with a cough that was mostly nerves and a little bit lungs. Prudence gave her the licorice root and the honey and told her to keep her feet dry and got her out the door before the wagon had come to a stop. Fletcher climbed down. He was not wearing his good coat this time. He was wearing his working coat. He had brought his son. The boy was 10, tall for 10. He had his father's coloring and his father's stillness. He held himself the way a door holds itself when it has been shut for a long time and is not sure it remembers how to open. Prudence stood in her doorway. "Mr. Roundtree." "Ma'am, this is Wallace." "Wallace." "Ma'am." His voice was thin. It came out through a jaw that did not want to release it. He did not look at her face. He looked at her collarbone. "Come in out of the cold, both of you." She had not planned to say it. It came out anyway. Because a 10-year-old boy who could not look at a stranger's face was a 10-year-old boy who needed to be inside a warm room, whether or not his father was foolish enough to bring him to her. They came in. Fletcher had to duck under the doorframe. He knew he had to duck. She could see him knowing it, adjusting without thinking, the way tall men learn to move through rooms not built for them. "Sit." He sat. The chair complained. He set his hat on his knee. Wallace stood beside the chair. Wallace did not sit until his father put a hand on his shoulder and pressed down once gently, which was apparently the signal Wallace had been waiting for. Hattie had come into the room without a sound. She was standing in the doorway to the kitchen with a dish towel in her hand and her eyes on Wallace. Not on Fletcher, not on her mother, on Wallace. Prudence did not look at Hattie. She never looked at Hattie in front of strangers, because Hattie was doing her work, and her work was to see, and if her mother looked at her while she was seeing, she would stop. "I did not invite you, Mr. Roundtree." "No, ma'am. I made it clear on Saturday that I would not." "You made it clear. I heard you clearly. And yet." "And yet." He turned the hat in his hands. Once. Twice. "I said I was not finished. You disagreed. I have been thinking about which of us was right. And I have concluded, ma'am, respectfully, that I was." "You have concluded that?" "Yes, ma'am." "Well, I would like to feed you supper, Mrs. Ashfield. You and your children. That is what I have come to ask, not tonight. Some evening this week when the weather allows. My kitchen, my table, so that you can see the house before you decide what to say about it." "I have already said what to say about it." "You said no to what I asked in the street. I have not asked you the same question twice. I am asking a different one." Which? She had a habit of tracking the exact word a person was using because words were the only reliable indicator she had of what a person actually wanted. And the word he had chosen was different, and the difference mattered. "Mr. Roundtree." "Fletcher, if you please, ma'am." "Mr. Roundtree, what do you actually want from me?" "I want you to look at the room I built for a woman 4 years ago and see whether it feels like a room a woman could live in." There was a small sound from the doorway. Hattie. A breath she had not meant to let out. Prudence did not look at her. She looked at Wallace instead. The boy had not lifted his eyes. He was staring at his own boots, but she saw the way his shoulders had come up around his ears when his father said the words. A woman 4 years ago. She understood that shape. She had watched her own children hold themselves in exactly that shape after Nathaniel died. Every time someone said his name aloud in front of them. Wallace. The boy looked up, not at her face, at her chin. How old are you? 10, ma'am. Do you want to eat supper with us? His father went very still. He had not asked the question. It had been asked around him. Wallace considered his boots. He considered them until she began to think he would not answer. Then without looking up, he said, yes, ma'am. Then we will come. Fletcher's breath left him, not loud. She would not have heard it if she had not been listening. Thursday, he said. Thursday. I will send the wagon. I have a wagon. I will send mine anyway. She looked at him. Mr. Roundtree, you are the most stubborn man I have ever spoken to. I have been told, ma'am, by many people, by most people. Yes, ma'am. That was the moment her mouth almost betrayed her. She caught it in time. She turned to the counter and adjusted a jar that did not need adjusting. Thursday, Mr. Roundtree, my children and I will come to your house, and I will look at your room. Yes, ma'am. And I will not promise anything past that. No, ma'am. Now go. He went. Wallace went with him. The door closed. The wagon pulled out. Hattie was still in the doorway. Prudence did not turn. He liked Wallace, Hattie said. Who did? You. You liked Wallace. Hattie. You did, I saw. Hattie, go peel the potatoes. Hattie went to peel the potatoes. She went slowly, and when she thought her mother was not looking, she smiled to herself. The smallest smile a 12-year-old girl could smile without her mother seeing it. Her mother saw it. Her mother did not say anything, because there are some things a woman does not say to her daughter. And one of them is, thank you for seeing what I could not afford to see myself. Thursday came the way days come when you have decided in advance that you are not looking forward to them and would like them not to arrive. Jedediah wore his good shirt. He had been told to wear his good shirt at 8 in the morning and had spent the 6 hours between then and the wagon's arrival explaining to anyone who would listen that he was wearing his good shirt because they were going to see a real ranch with real horses and probably some pigs, and he had asked about the pigs and nobody would tell him, and it was starting to feel like a personal insult. Hattie wore her second best dress. She had considered her best. She had rejected it. She had told Prudence at breakfast that wearing her best would be trying too hard, and trying too hard would tell Mr. Roundtree that they cared about impressing him, and they did not care about impressing him so. Prudence had not argued with the reasoning. It was flawless. She wore her gray. It was her only decent dress that was not black. She wore it because black would have said one thing and her Sunday would have said another, and gray said nothing, which was what she had decided to say. The wagon came at 11. Fletcher drove. Wallace sat beside him. Wallace was wearing a coat that was too new. Someone had put it on him that morning. Someone had brushed his hair. Someone had done all the things a mother would do, and it was clear from the exactness of it that it had been done by a father who was trying very hard. She saw it. She did not comment on it. She helped Jedediah into the wagon and lifted Hattie's bag in behind her and sat on the seat beside Fletcher without accepting the hand he offered. He put the hand down without comment. The ride was 2 hours. The road climbed. The wind was less at the higher elevation because the pines caught it. Jedediah talked. Wallace answered him in short, polite sentences that got a little less polite and a little more real as the road went on. By the last mile, Wallace was actually laughing at something Jedediah had said about a rabbit. Prudence heard it. She heard it, and something in her chest that had been fine and steady for 3 years did something she had not asked it to. She did not turn her head. She kept her eyes on the road. Fletcher did not turn his head either, but she felt him hearing it. She felt him hearing it the same way she was. The ranch came into view over the last rise. She had prepared herself for something. She was not sure what. Something rough, something manly, something that would make it easy to say no on the ride home. The ranch was not that. The ranch was a house on a rise with a porch that ran the length of the front and a chimney that was smoking already because someone had made sure the fire was built up before they arrived. There was a kitchen garden bed alongside the south wall, empty now waiting. There was a barn to the east that had been painted once and needed painting again. There were two milk cows in a pen and a horse in the corral and a dog somewhere out of sight that started barking when the wagon came into the yard. The house was not grand. The house was loved. Prudence saw the difference immediately. She saw 100 small choices that had been made by hands that intended to stay. The angle of the porch to catch the morning light. The way the chimney had been placed to draw properly in a north wind. The garden bed laid out with the care of someone who had planned 2 summers in advance. Somebody had built this for a woman. Somebody had built this for a woman, and then the woman had gone. She got down from the wagon before Fletcher could offer his hand. She stood in the yard. She looked at the house. Fletcher stood beside her. He did not speak. He waited. "It is a real house," she said. "Yes, ma'am." "You built it." "I built it." "Yes, ma'am. And another man, too. I had help, but my hands are on every board." "Who was the other man?" He hesitated. Then he said, "My brother-in-law, Josephine's brother. He came out from Boston when I sent for him. He stayed the summer of '75. He went back in the fall." "You know his name?" "Ma'am." "You know his name, but you did not say it, which means it cost you something to say it." He looked at her. "His name was Adam," Fletcher said. "He died 3 years ago. Consumption." "I am sorry." "So am I." They stood in the yard. The dog was still barking somewhere. Jedediah had already climbed down and was running toward the barn with Wallace 3 steps behind him. Wallace was not chasing. Wallace was making sure Jedediah did not fall into a trough. Hattie stood by the wagon. Hattie was looking at the house. "May I go inside?" Hattie asked it directly. She was not asking her mother. She was asking Fletcher. Fletcher did not look at Prudence. He looked at Hattie. "Yes, ma'am, please do." Hattie went inside. Prudence watched her go. 12 years old, asking permission of a man she had known for less than a week. Getting it. Walking in as if the walking in had been decided somewhere she could not see. Fletcher. His head came up because she had called him by his given name. She had not meant to. It had happened anyway. "Yes, ma'am." "Nothing. Show me the house." The house had 2 things she was not prepared for. The first was the kitchen. It was large. It was larger than the kitchen in the parsonage. It had 2 windows facing east, so the morning light came in twice. There was a work table long enough to roll pastry the length of 2 women's arms. The stove was a good one. Iron, fresh black polish. The wood in the box beside it had been split fine and stacked with the exactness of a man who had been raised by a woman who cared about such things. She stood in the middle of the kitchen. She placed her hand flat on the work table. The wood was smooth. Somebody had oiled it. The second thing she was not prepared for was the smaller room off the kitchen. Fletcher pointed to it without going in. That was going to be a nursery. She looked at the door. The door was closed. She did not open it. She did not need to. "I built it for the second child," he said, "because Josephine and I had decided, and she was going to tell me at Christmas that year. She had known for a month and had wanted to wait until Christmas, except the fever came in November." Fletcher. "I keep the door closed. I have not opened it in 4 years." Fletcher. He looked at her. His face was doing the work it always did, holding everything he was feeling behind the still surface of it. He was very good at it. He had had years of practice. "You did not have to tell me that. You asked to see the house." "I did not ask to see that." "You asked to see the house." She understood him then, all of him, or enough of him that the rest could wait. I was showing her the whole thing. He was not hiding the closed door. He was not pretending the closed door did not exist. He was saying, "This is what my house is. It is a good kitchen, and it is a closed door, and you are looking at both." She did not know what to say to that. She said nothing. Hattie came into the kitchen. Hattie had been through the whole house, apparently. She had made herself at home in a way that a 12-year-old girl who has seen too many kitchens should not have been able to. "The pantry is well laid out," Hattie said. "You have herbs in the wrong order, but it is fixable." Fletcher looked at Prudence. Prudence looked at Hattie. "Hattie, I am only saying, do not tell Mr. Rowntree how to organize his pantry the first time you are in his house. He asked me to look at the house. He did not ask you to critique the herbs." "He should have," Hattie said, and she went outside to find the boys. Fletcher was standing with his mouth partway open. He closed it. He opened it again. Your daughter, I know, is. I know Fletcher. Just so we are clear, ma'am, she is welcome to organize my pantry, if she would like to. Please do not tell her that. She will. He laughed. It was not a large laugh. It was not the kind of laugh a large man makes when a large man is trying to fill a room. It was small and warm and a little surprised, as if his own laugh had caught him off guard. Prudence did not look at him while he laughed, because if she looked at him, she was going to smile, and she was not ready to smile at him. And there were rules about these things that she had made for herself, and she had every intention of keeping the rules until she decided otherwise. Supper was 3 courses. She had not expected 3 courses. She had expected stew. He had made a stew, which was fair, but he had also roasted a chicken, which was more than fair, and he had baked bread, which was extraordinary. You baked this? Yes, ma'am. Yourself? Yes, ma'am. My mother taught me. Before she died, I was 8. Mr. Rowntree. Fletcher, ma'am, please. Fletcher, there are things I do not know about you. There are many things, ma'am. You bake bread. Yes, ma'am. Well, the boys ate. Jedediah ate as if he was worried the food would be taken from him. Wallace ate slower. Wallace watched Jedediah and matched him. When Jedediah went for a second piece of chicken, Wallace went for one too. It was the first time Wallace had taken seconds at his own table in 4 years. Prudence did not know this. Fletcher knew it. Fletcher watched it happen and did not say a word. Hattie ate carefully. She was cataloging the kitchen. She was cataloging the pantry through the open door. She was cataloging Fletcher's manner of speaking to his son, the way he said Wallace's name, the way he passed the salt without being asked. Hattie was a small, quiet court, and the court was in session. The meal ended. The dishes were cleared. Fletcher stood up to wash them, and Prudence stood up to help him. And they did the dishes side by side without saying anything for the full length of the washing and the drying, and by the end of it, they had a rhythm. She washed. He dried. He was faster than she was because his hands were bigger. He slowed down. She did not comment on him slowing down. He did not comment on her not commenting. The children had gone outside. Hattie was on the porch with a book. Wallace and Jedediah were somewhere near the barn. She could hear their voices coming through the window. Jedediah was doing most of the talking. Wallace was doing most of the laughing. It was not a sound she had heard from Wallace before, but she recognized it as the sound she had heard on the last mile of the road, only more of it. The lamp on the kitchen table burned low. Fletcher hung the towel over the back of a chair. Mrs. Ashfield. Prudence. He looked at her. Prudence. Yes. He was going to say something. She could see him gathering to say it. She could see him deciding whether it was too soon. He decided it was too soon. He said instead, "Thank you for coming, ma'am. Thank you for bringing them." She looked at him. She understood the shape of what he had not said. She understood it and let it stay unsaid. "Thank you for the bread, Fletcher." He drove them home in the dark. The stars came out over Black Elk Pass. Jedediah fell asleep with his head against Hattie's shoulder. Hattie did not move him. Hattie let him sleep the whole way down. At the bottom of the pass, where the road smoothed out, Fletcher spoke. He did not turn his head. He kept his eyes on the road. "May I come again on Saturday?" Yes. She had said it before she had decided to say it. He did not turn his head. She saw the corner of his mouth move. That was all. Then Wallace ran. She would learn later that it happened while Fletcher was checking the horse. He had stopped at the small livery at the edge of Cottonwood Bluff to water the mare before the last stretch to Prudence's place, and Wallace had climbed down to help him, and Fletcher had turned his back for 1 minute to speak to the livery boy about the price of oats, and when he turned around, the wagon was empty. He knew immediately. He came running to Prudence's door with his hat in his hand and his eyes 10 years too old for his face. "He is gone." "Who?" "Wallace, from the wagon. 15 minutes. I checked the store. I checked the church. I checked the yard behind the smithy. He is not." "Fletcher." "I do not know where he—" "Fletcher, get inside." He got inside. He stood in the middle of her healing room, which he was too big for, and he put his hand flat against the wall as if he needed the wall to hold him up. "Hattie." Hattie appeared in the doorway. She had heard everything. She was already dressed. "Watch Jedediah. Do not open the door for anyone except Sheriff Clay. Do you hear me? Yes, Mama. I mean it. Nobody, not Martha, not the Reverend, not anybody. Yes, Mama. Come, Fletcher. They went out into the cold. The moon was up. The moon was small and hard. Fletcher went one way. She went the other. They agreed to meet at the church in an hour if neither of them had found him. She did not find him at the schoolhouse, not behind the mercantile, not at the stable where the wagon still stood with the horse still in the traces, not at the water pump or the well or the alley behind the tavern. She was standing in the cold at the edge of the churchyard when she saw the door. The church door was open by an inch, not by a foot, by an inch, the kind of inch that could be the wind, and the wind had not opened it because there was no wind, and the inch of it was too clean. She went in. The church was dark. It was cold. It smelled of dust and old candles and the winter smell of a building that nobody sat in until Sunday. He was in the front pew. He was very small. He was doubled over with his forehead against his knees and his hands over the back of his neck, as if he were expecting the roof to fall. I was making a sound. It was the sound a child makes when the child has been holding something for a very long time and cannot hold it anymore. It was not crying quite. It was the room a crying makes before the crying decides to arrive. She did not run to him. She did not call his name. She walked to the pew. She sat down beside him. She did not touch him. She sat with her hands in her lap. She let the sound in the church be the only sound. After a while, he lifted his head. He did not look at her. He looked at the altar. You came. I came. He is looking for me. Yes. He always looks. Yes. The boy took a breath. It went in ragged. My mother did not come back. No, Wallace, she did not. She got sick, and she did not come back. Yes. They said she chose to leave. Who said? Nobody said. I heard it once. Wallace. She turned toward him. She still did not touch him. Sickness is not a choice. It is a thing that happens. Your mother did not choose to leave you. She loved you. She did not want to go. How do you know? Because I have watched a great many people die. Not one of them chose it. Not one. He was quiet. My husband died, she said. 5 years and a month. He caught a fever on a Tuesday. He was gone 11 days later. He held my hand until he could not hold anything at all. He was not choosing. He was holding on. You loved him. Yes. Do you still? Yes. He was quiet. So then. So then what, Wallace? So then you can love him and still love. She did not finish the sentence for him. She let him have it. He did not finish it either, but she could see him working it, turning it, deciding whether to trust it. I did not run because I was afraid, he said. No. I ran because I wanted to know if you would come. My mother said she was going to the doctor in Bismarck. She never came back. Wallace. So I wanted to know. You wanted to know if I would look. Yes. Wallace, listen to me. He looked at her. He looked at her face. It was the first time he had looked at her face directly. I will always look. His breath went out of him. All of it. His whole body went smaller. She put her hand on his back. She did not pull him toward her. She left her hand there. She let him decide. He leaned. He leaned against her side, and he put his face against her shoulder, and he cried. He was 10 years old, and he cried the way a boy cries when the crying has been waiting 4 years for a place to arrive. The church door creaked. Fletcher was in the doorway. He was breathing hard. He saw them. He did not come forward. He stood in the doorway with his hat in his hand, and he watched his son cry against another woman's shoulder, and he did not move. Prudence looked at him over the top of Wallace's head. She did not speak. She only looked. Fletcher put his hand flat against the doorframe. She saw his knuckles go white. He did not cry. He was not a man who cried in front of other people. But she saw what would have been the crying if he had let it come. She saw the shape of it, the whole shape held inside a body that had been holding shapes like it for 4 years and did not know how to put them down. They stayed like that a while, Wallace crying, Fletcher in the doorway, Prudence with her hand on the boy's back. Then Wallace lifted his head. He wiped his face with the back of his coat sleeve. He looked at his father. P. Yes, boy. I am ready to go home. All right. Wallace slid off the pew. He walked to his father. Fletcher put his hand on the top of his son's head and held it there a beat. Then he took the boy's hand. He looked at Prudence. Ma'am, Fletcher, I do not. He stopped. He tried again. I do not have the words. You do not need them. He nodded. Once, they left. She sat in the pew a while longer. The church was cold. She was cold. She sat there anyway, because she needed a moment where nobody could see her, and the church was empty, and empty rooms had been her friends for 5 years. I will always look. She had said it to a child. She had said it without thinking. She had said it because she had meant it, and she had meant it because she had walked into a dark church looking for a boy she had not birthed, and had found him, and had known before she found him that she would keep looking until she did. That was a thing that had happened to her without her permission. She did not know what to do with it. She stood up. She walked home. Sleep did not come that night. She sat at the kitchen table until the fire went low. She sat there because she was thinking. Because if she went to bed with what she was thinking, she would not sleep anyway. Because the kitchen was quieter than the bedroom. Around 4 in the morning, she got up and went to the trunk at the foot of Nathaniel's side of the bed. It had not been Nathaniel's side of the bed for 5 years. She still called it that. The trunk had been Nathaniel's. She had not opened it since the year he died. She had gone through the papers on top. She had left the rest. She opened it. She was looking for. She did not know what she was looking for. She was looking for the shape of the man she had been married to, because tonight she needed to remember him clearly. Because tonight she had said a thing to another woman's son that she had once said or meant to say or would have said to Nathaniel's children. And she needed to sit with her husband's face for a minute before she went any further with what her heart was doing. The papers were where she had left them. Under the papers in a bundle she did not remember was a letter. It was addressed to her, in Nathaniel's hand. The seal was unbroken. Her hand went cold. She broke the seal. Prudence, it began. If you are reading this, then I did not have the chance to tell you what I want to tell you. And I am sorry for that because it was to have been a surprise. She read the rest. She read it twice. She sat very still. Nathaniel had borrowed money. Nathaniel had borrowed a sum of $200 from a man in Chicago named Blackthorne. He had borrowed it in the spring of 1876, a year and a half before he died. He had borrowed it to buy a parcel of land east of Cottonwood Bluff, a parcel that ran along the ridgeline adjoining the old military road. He had not told her because he had wanted to surprise her. He had wanted to build a real house on the parcel. He had wanted to give her a garden that was hers. The letter said the deed was in a locked box in the office of a lawyer in Yankton. The letter said the loan was to be repaid over 5 years. The letter said if anything happened to him before the loan was paid, she was to contact the lawyer at once, and the terms provided for the widow too. The letter said if she needed help with any of it, she was to write to Adam, Fletcher's brother-in-law. Adam. Fletcher's Adam. The Adam who had died 3 years ago. Prudence sat with the letter in her hand. Her mouth was open. She did not know when it had opened. She closed it. Nathaniel and Adam had known each other. Nathaniel had trusted Adam with the safeguarding of his family. Nathaniel had bought land with money borrowed from a Chicago man named Blackthorne. Nathaniel had died before the surprise could be finished. Nobody had ever contacted the lawyer in Yankton. Nobody had ever told her the land was hers. Nobody had ever told her the debt was in her name. For 5 years. For 5 years, the debt had been sitting in a lawyer's box in Yankton gathering interest. For 5 years, a man in Chicago named Blackthorne had been waiting. She stood up. She did not know she was standing. The letter was in her hand. Her hand was shaking. She thought about Fletcher's ranch. She thought about the ridge line east of Cottonwood Bluff. She thought about the parcel her husband had bought her as a surprise, running along the ridge line adjoining Fletcher's land. Because Fletcher's ranch was on the ridge line. Fletcher had told her. Fletcher had said the land above Black Elk Pass on the eastern rise, which meant the parcel Nathaniel had bought was next to Fletcher's ranch, which meant a man in Chicago named Blackthorne had since 1876 been in possession of a note against a piece of land directly adjoining the ranch of a large widower rancher who had 4 days ago come down into Cottonwood Bluff and taken off his hat in the mud in front of the widow he had chosen. She sat down. She sat down at the kitchen table. She placed the letter flat in front of her. She smoothed it with her hand. Because a man does not stumble into a coincidence like this. Because a man in Chicago named Blackthorne, who holds a note against a widow's land, does not simply forget about it for 5 years. Because a man like that either has a use for the note or is saving it for a use. Because. And because she had 4 days ago, in front of the whole of Cottonwood Bluff, been chosen in the mud street by the very man whose ranch adjoined the land the note was against. She heard the healing room door open. She had not heard footsteps in the yard. She had not heard the gate. She had not heard anything. But the door had opened because the small bell she had hung on the frame the day she moved in was ringing very softly. She got up. She folded the letter. She put it in the front of her dress against her chest. She walked into the healing room. A man was standing inside her door. A man she had never seen before. He was dressed like the East. He was carrying a leather case. He was removing his gloves finger by finger with the slow deliberateness of a man who had done it in 100 rooms and expected the room to wait for him. "Mrs. Ashfield," he said. She said nothing. He smiled. It did not reach anything. "My name," he said, "is Percival Draymore. I represent certain business interests in Chicago. Might I trouble you for a few minutes of your time?" She stood in the doorway of her own kitchen with her husband's letter against her heart. And she understood that the man who had waited 5 years had not been waiting for nothing. The waiting was over. She did not offer him a chair. That was the first thing she decided, before she decided anything else, before she decided whether to be afraid of him or angry or careful. She decided he would stand. Because a man who walks into a woman's healing room before the sun is fully up without knocking, without waiting, is a man who has already told you what kind of man he is. She let him stand. "Mr. Draymore, Mrs. Ashfield, you have not been invited." "No, ma'am, I have not." "Then you should perhaps invite yourself back out again." His smile moved a small distance on his face and stopped short of arriving anywhere. He set the leather case on the counter she used for her tinctures. He did not ask if he could set it there. He set it there. She looked at the case. She looked at him. "Get that off my counter." He blinked. Once, twice. "Mrs. Ashfield, I said get it off my counter. That counter is for medicine. Your case is not medicine. Move it." He moved it. He moved it slowly to prove he was moving it because he wanted to. He set it on the floor beside his boot. His smile had gone tight around the edges. She did not smile back. She stood behind her work table with her hands folded and Nathaniel's letter pressed against her chest under the front of her dress. She was aware of the letter the whole time. She was aware of the folded weight of it against her sternum. Because the letter was the reason he was in her room, and he did not know she had it, and she was going to keep it that way. "You wanted a few minutes, Mr. Draymore." "I did." "Well, I represent business interests in Chicago." "You said." "Interests connected to a Mr. Thurgood Blackthorne." "I do not know that name." She said it flat. She said it the way she had learned to say things that she had decided the man across from her was not entitled to. She had been a widow for 5 years. She had learned. There was a certain shape a lie had to have when a woman was lying to protect her own house, and she had gotten very good at making the shape. Except Draymore had not blinked when he had said the name, which meant Draymore had expected her to recognize it, which meant Draymore knew she had a reason to. He recovered fast, but he had blinked. "Mr. Blackthorne extended a loan to your late husband, Mrs. Ashfield, in the spring of 1876, $200, against certain land east of Cottonwood Bluff." "My husband did not tell me about a loan." "That is possible. That is the truth. I am not accusing you of anything, ma'am. I am informing you of a state of affairs. The debt has been outstanding for nearly 6 years. Interest has accrued. The current sum with interest is closer to $430. $430. She had $23.86 in a jar under the floor. She had $23.86 that had taken her 5 years and every no she had ever said to herself to build. $430. Nothing moved on her face. "Mr. Draymore?" "Ma'am, are you here to collect?" "I am here to offer terms." "What terms?" He opened his leather case. He took out a folded paper. He set the paper on her work table, not the counter. He had been clear on that. The work table. She did not touch the paper. Mr. Blackthorne is a man of some flexibility, Draymore said, when the circumstances warrant. The debt is real. The debt is enforceable. But Mr. Blackthorne is not at heart a hard man. He sounds delightful. He is prepared to consider the debt forgiven. Is he? Under certain conditions. Which? Which relate less to the debt itself than to certain associations you have been forming recently. Certain acquaintances. There it was. She had known it was coming. She had known it since she had read the letter 3 hours ago at the kitchen table. She had known it the way a woman with a healer's hands knows a fever is going to break, because the body tells you before the fever does. She did not let herself react. Mr. Draymore, say what you mean. I mean, Mrs. Ashfield, that Mr. Blackthorne has been made aware of your growing acquaintance with a Mr. Fletcher Rowntree. How was he made aware? Mr. Blackthorne is a man with many friends. In Cottonwood Bluff. Everywhere. Everywhere is a lot of places, Mr. Draymore. Perhaps you could narrow it down. His smile had gone all the way tight now. It was the face a smile makes when it has been asked to work overtime and is beginning to fail. Mrs. Ashfield, Mr. Draymore, if you would sever your acquaintance with Mr. Rowntree, cleanly, publicly, in a manner that leaves no doubt, Mr. Blackthorne would consider the debt discharged. In full, no further inquiry, no lien on your late husband's parcel. You may keep the land. The land is yours, free and clear. How generous. He is not asking for much, ma'am. He is asking me to walk away from a man because a man in Chicago does not want me to walk toward him. That is a great deal, Mr. Draymore. It is a great deal to ask, and it is a great deal more to give. It is an offer. It is a threat with a bow on it. He looked at her. He looked at her a beat longer than politeness required. She looked back. She did not look away. She had not looked away from anything worth looking at since she was 19 years old, and she was not going to start with a lawyer from Chicago in her own front room at 6:30 in the morning. Mrs. Ashfield, Mr. Draymore, get out of my healing room. You have not asked what happens if you refuse. I do not need to ask. Mrs. Ashfield, you will file on the debt. You will threaten the land. You will make my life difficult in ways I have not yet imagined, but which you have. I understand the arrangement. Now get out of my room. He picked up the folded paper. He picked up his case. He put his gloves back on finger by finger with the same slow deliberateness he had removed them with. It was meant she's supposed to intimidate. She watched it with the same expression she watched a hen fluff its feathers. At the door, he stopped. Mrs. Ashfield, you are a woman of some intelligence. Yes. I would not have expected you to make a foolish choice. You have not seen me make one yet. I have seen you refuse to hear a reasonable offer. You have seen me refuse to be bought. Those are not the same, Mr. Draymore. It concerns me a little that you cannot tell the difference. Perhaps you have not been in this line of work long. The tightness in his mouth cracked. Just for a second. She saw the anger under the smile. She saw it and cataloged it. He left. She stood in the healing room after the door closed. She listened. She listened until she heard his boots on the porch and then on the yard, and then the sound of a horse she had not heard arrive being led away. Then she sat down on the stool by her work table. She sat down because her legs had decided she was going to. She had not decided. Her legs had. Her hand went to the front of her dress. Nathaniel's letter was still there, warm from her skin. She said quietly to the empty room, "All right." Because if a man in Chicago had been sitting on a debt for 6 years without doing anything about it, and then within 4 days of Fletcher Rowntree walking into Cottonwood Bluff and taking off his hat in front of her, a lawyer from that man arrived in her front room offering to forgive it if she would walk away, then this was not about her land. This was about Fletcher's. She got up. She went to the kitchen. She put the letter back in the trunk. She locked the trunk. She had never locked the trunk before. She locked it now. Then she put on her coat and her boots and her thickest scarf because she was going to the telegraph office. Because a woman who had been offered a bribe by a lawyer at 6:30 in the morning did not sit down and wait to find out what was really going on. A woman who had been offered a bribe by a lawyer at 6:30 in the morning went and found out. The telegraph clerk was a man named Corwin Bly. He was 73. He had run the telegraph in Cottonwood Bluff since the wire went through, and he had opinions on most things, and he tried very hard to keep them behind his teeth when he was on duty. He did not always succeed. Prudence walked in. She stamped the snow off her boots. Corwin Bly looked up. Prudence. Corwin, you are early. So are you. I live here. Fair. She wrote out the message. She wrote it small. She wrote it careful. Corwin watched her write it without a pretending he was not watching. Yankton, he said. Land records. Yes. Any particular section. All of it. He looked at her. That is a lot of records to ask for Prudence. I know. That is going to cost. I know. That is going to cost more than you have on you. I have on me exactly what I have on me, Corwin. If it is not enough, I will get more. Corwin did the arithmetic with the pencil behind his ear. He wrote it out. He turned the pad around to show her. $2.40. $2.40 was the entire cash she had removed from the jar under the floor at 4 in the morning after she had read Nathaniel's letter. She counted the coins out. Corwin looked at her hands. He looked at the coins. He looked at her face. Prudence. Corwin, this is your last. No. This is your last cash, Prudence Ashfield. I have known you for 11 years. I know what your hand looks like when you are counting out the last of it. Corwin, I am not sending this on your last. You are. I am not. Corwin, I am going to say this once, and I am going to say it kindly, because you have been kind to me for 11 years. But you are going to send this wire, and you are going to send it now. He looked at her. There is trouble. There is trouble. Roundtree, I did not say that. You did not have to say that. I saw the wagon come and go on Thursday. I have eyes, Prudence. Corwin, please send the wire. He sent the wire, he sent it, and gave her back her $2.40. Corwin, I did not do it for you. Then who? For your husband. Nathaniel was a good man. He came in here for 6 years. He never sent a wire he did not need to. He never spoke a word out of turn. If Nathaniel's widow is standing in my office at 6:45 in the morning, putting her last coin on my counter to send a wire to Yankton, then something is wrong, and I am not going to be the man who charged her for it. Take your money, put it back in the jar. She looked at him. She had not told him about the jar. He met her eyes. It was briefly something a little like a smile. Everybody who has a jar keeps it under a floorboard, Prudence. It is not a secret. It is a fact about jars. Her mouth twitched. She caught it before it went further. She folded the coins back into her palm and she said, Thank you, Corwin. Go home, warm up, wait for the wire. She went home. She warmed up. She waited. Waiting was not what she was good at. She waited by walking around the healing room and rearranging jars that did not need rearranging. She waited by making biscuits she did not need. She waited by mending a hem in Hattie's dress that had not been torn. Hattie watched her from the doorway with the expression Hattie wore when she had decided her mother was doing something suspicious and she was going to say nothing about it until her mother volunteered. Hattie was very good at waiting for volunteered information. Prudence did not volunteer. The wire came back in 3 days. Corwin brought it himself. He walked from the telegraph office to the healing room in the middle of the afternoon with his hat pulled low and his hands empty except for the folded paper. He did not want to send the boy. He did not want the boy to see whatever was in the paper. Corwin was a careful man. He handed it to her without a word. She read it standing up. She read it once. She sat down. She read it again. Corwin watched her. Prudence. Corwin, is it what you thought? It is worse. How much worse? She looked up at him. 8 months worse. He nodded, slow, grim. He understood. He had not seen the wire. He did not need to. He had known what the shape of it was going to be before he brought it over. Prudence, what do you need? I need a horse. You have your own horse. I need a fast one. Mine is old. Mine is not much better. Corwin, I will get you Frank Tibbetts. Frank has a mare that will do it. Ask him, please, now. Prudence, I have to get to the ranch before dark. You will not be back before dark. No. You are going to stay the night up there. I am. Prudence. Corwin, do not. He looked at her. I was going to say I would look in on your children. Oh, her mouth twitched again. It was becoming a habit. Thank you, Corwin. I will send Martha over. She will sit with them. Hattie will manage, but Jedediah is 9 and a 9-year-old with only a 12-year-old sister. Overnight is a 9-year-old who will try to cook something. Martha is a saint. Martha is a busybody, but she is on your side, and busybodies who are on your side are useful. Corwin, go. I will get the mare. She saddled up on Frank Tibbet's mare in the yard 40 minutes later. Hattie stood on the porch with Jedediah in front of her. Jedediah did not understand what was happening. Hattie understood the entire thing. Prudence could see it in her daughter's face. Mama, Hattie, you are going to the ranch. Yes. Because of the wire. Yes. Because of the man who came Friday morning. Hattie, I saw him leave Mama. He got on a horse he had tied at the back of the smithy. Why would he tie his horse at the back of the smithy if he had legitimate business? Hattie, I am only saying. I know what you are only saying, Hattie. Yes, Mama. Watch your brother. Do exactly what Martha tells you. Do not open the door for anyone else. I will be back tomorrow. Yes, Mama. And Hattie, yes, Mama. Thank you for seeing him. Hattie's face did not change, but her chin lifted the smallest fraction of an inch. It was the closest thing to pride her daughter would allow herself. Prudence rode. She rode hard, not the mare hard. She could not do that to a horse she did not own. But she rode with intention. She rode with the kind of purpose that made the horse decide without being asked that today was not a lazy day. The mare took her up Black Elk Pass in 90 minutes and stopped by the porch of Fletcher's ranch as the last light was going gold over the western ridge. Fletcher came out of the house before she had dismounted. He saw her face. She did not have to say anything. What? Inside. Prudence. Inside Fletcher. Now. Please. He took the mare's rein. He handed it to a man she had not seen before who had come out of the barn. The man tipped his hat to her and led the mare away. She would learn his name later. Right now, she did not have time for names. Fletcher put his hand at the small of her back, not to guide her, to let her know he was there. It was the first time he had touched her. She was aware of it. She did not think about it. She could not afford to. Inside, she put the wire on his kitchen table. He read it. His face did the thing his face did. Went still the way water goes still before it freezes when all the movement has been decided and nothing shows on the surface. 8 months. 8 months, Fletcher. Meridian Holdings. A shell. Blackthorn is the principal. It is the same man. The same. The same Fletcher. He owns the note on my land. My land which is next to yours. My land which I did not know I had until 3 days ago, because Nathaniel took the loan without telling me, because he wanted to surprise me with a garden. Prudence. Do not. Prudence. Do not say anything soft to me, Fletcher. Not right now. If you say anything soft to me right now, I am going to sit down on your kitchen floor. And I do not have time to sit down on your kitchen floor. Because there is a man in Chicago who has been 8 months into contesting your ranch, and you did not know, and I did not know. And there is a lawyer who came into my healing room Friday morning at 6:30 and offered to forgive my husband's debt if I would walk away from you. Which means he has been planning this for months. This is the shape it is going to take, Fletcher. He was going to use my land to get to yours. Prudence. Fletcher, do not be soft. Be here. He was quiet. He took a breath. He set the wire down. He set it flat. He smoothed it with his hand the way she had smoothed Nathaniel's letter at her kitchen table 3 days ago. All right, he said. All right. You want to see the original survey and the deed and every filing I have on this ranch? Yes. They are in a box in the cabinet by the fireplace. I built the cabinet for the box. I have had them there for 11 years. Show me. He showed her. The box was cedar. It smelled of cedar. It had been made by a man who had made it slowly and well. He set it on the table. He opened it. The papers were in order. She could see that at a glance. They were more than in order. They were meticulous. They were the papers of a man who had asked every question before he had signed anything and had kept every receipt. She went through them. She took her time. Fletcher did not hover. He put a kettle on. He made tea. He set a cup at her elbow. He did not speak. He sat across the table. He watched her read. He watched the way a man watches a doctor read a wound. Not to hurry her, to be present. She read for an hour. At the end of the hour, she looked up. Fletcher, yes, your papers are clean. I know. Better than clean. They are exemplary. I have never seen a homestead file this well organized. Someone taught you to do this. My wife, she said a man who does not keep his papers right is a man who is building on sand. She was correct. She usually was. He said it without heaviness. He said it the way a man says a true thing about a woman he loved when he has done enough grieving to be able to speak of her without needing the room to grieve with him. Prudence looked at him. She did not say what she wanted to say. What she wanted to say was she must have been a remarkable woman, and she is not the point of this conversation. And I am glad you loved her, and I am not going to make you talk about her tonight because tonight we have a rancher's land to save. And, she stopped her own thought before it went where it wanted to go. Because there was another and. There was, and I am not competing with her, and I do not intend to. Which was true. Which was also a great deal to sort out at 8 o'clock at night in another woman's kitchen. So she did not sort it out. She put it down. Fletcher. Yes. The contest filing will be attacking the boundary. That is the only place they can attack. Your deed is sound. Your homestead claim is airtight. But they can claim the survey was wrong at the time of the original filing. If they can show a defect in the boundary markers, they can force a resurvey. And a resurvey is a delay. A delay is expensive. Expensive is how Blackthorn wins. He does not need to win the case. He needs you to run out of money and sell. He does not know me if he thinks I will run out of money. He does not need to know you. He needs your ranch to become more expensive than you can carry. He does that by tying it up in court. Prudence. So we defend the boundary, which means we need the original survey, which means we need the surveyor, or his notes, or a notary who witnessed the boundary marking. There was a notary. Who? Ezra Halbrook. Ezra Halbrook. She had heard that name. She had heard that name 3 days ago from a receipt her daughter had been sorting because Prudence had asked her to organize the old files in the back corner of the healing room. A receipt from a general store in Cottonwood Bluff, dated summer of '78. A man named Ezra Halbrook had bought provisions and had listed his destination as Deadwood. She had put the receipt aside without knowing why. She had put it aside because Hattie had put it in front of her with a look that said, "This seemed like something." And Prudence had trusted her daughter's face without asking her daughter to explain because that was how they had worked for 5 years. Ezra Halbrook was in Deadwood, or had been in Deadwood 4 years ago. She sat back. Fletcher. Yes. I know where Ezra Halbrook is. His head came up. You know. Or I know where he was in '78. He passed through Cottonwood Bluff, bought provisions, went to Deadwood. He was going to Deadwood to retire. His nephew has a livery there. He told me before he left. I have not written to him because I did not know I needed to. Write to him tonight. Tonight? Tonight, Fletcher. I want the letter on the mail wagon at first light. What do I ask him? Ask him if he remembers witnessing the survey. Ask him to write down what he remembers. Ask him if he kept his own notary records. He will have. Men who love their work keep records after they retire. And ask him. She stopped. Ask him if he ever heard the name Thurgood Blackthorn. Not because I think he did, because I want to know for certain. All right. He stood up. He got his paper. He got his pen. He sat down across from her. He wrote. She watched him write. She watched his hand. His hand was large. It was scarred across the knuckles. It moved slowly. Not because he did not know how to write, but because he was choosing every word, and every word was arriving at the paper the way a stone arrives at a wall a man is building. Placed, considered, set. She had twice in her life watched a man write a letter that mattered. Nathaniel had been the first. She did not think about that. She thought about Fletcher's hand. She thought about it too long. She looked down at the table. He finished the letter. He read it back to himself. He read it back to her. She said, add one more thing. Yes. Ask him if he witnessed anything for a woman named Josephine Roundtree. Anything at all, even years ago. He looked at her. Why? Because a man like Thurgood Blackthorne does not travel this far from Chicago for money. He came here for a specific ranch. He targeted your ranch specifically. There is a reason. He may not know I have started to see it. I do not want to be wrong about this. So I want to know if Josephine ever crossed his path in any way that ended up on paper, even by accident. That is all. Fletcher looked at her. You think this is not just money? I do not know what I think yet. I know that a man who has waited 6 years to collect a debt from a widow he has never met is not a man who is in a hurry for money. He is a man who is waiting for a reason to use the debt. He now has a reason. His reason is you. But he was already collecting the pieces before you gave him a reason, which means he was already interested in something or someone. Fletcher was quiet. He wrote the sentence at the bottom of the letter. He signed it. He folded it. He sealed it. They sat at the table. The fire had burned down. The kitchen was warm. Outside, the wind had risen. It was pushing at the eaves. The house held. Prudence. Yes. Josephine was born in Boston. I know, you said. Her family had money. I gathered. Not new money, old money. Her grandfather was in shipping. Her father was in banking. She was the youngest of 4. She had 2 brothers and a sister. Fletcher, I am telling you because you asked Prudence. I am not telling you to make you sit with her tonight. I am telling you because you asked. She looked at him. Go on. She left Boston in '70. She was 20. She came out with her brother Adam because Adam had lungs that were not going to survive Boston winters, and she was the one in the family who would come with him. She was the only one who did not need to stay for anything, and she came here because there was a doctor in Bismarck who was said to be good with lungs. That was where you met her. That was where I met her. I was hauling stone that year. Her doctor's carriage broke a wheel outside the yard. I fixed it. That is not a story I ever thought would matter. It mattered. Fletcher. She told me once that her family had not entirely approved of her leaving, that there had been complications. What kind? A man who had been persistent. Her father had wanted her to accept him. She had not wanted to accept him. She left with Adam partly for Adam's lungs, partly because Boston was becoming a place she did not want to be. Prudence was very still. Fletcher. What was the man's name? He looked at her. She never told me. She said it did not matter. She said she had left him behind. She said if I ever heard the name, she would tell me then. She never heard the name, neither did I, until... He stopped. Until 3 days ago, you brought a wire that has the name on it. Fletcher. I did not know it was the same man, Prudence. I did not know until I saw the wire. And even now, I do not know. I am telling you what she told me, and I am telling you what I do not know. She sat with it. She sat with it and she thought. Because if Josephine had left Boston in '70 to escape a persistent man, and that man had been a man of means, and that man had waited, and that man had been the kind of man who would wait 10 years, 12 years to reach the woman who had left him, and Josephine had died 4 years ago, and the man was still coming, then he was not coming for Josephine. He was coming to erase the place she had chosen instead. He was coming for the ranch. Because the ranch was the record of her refusal. The ranch was the house she had built with another man's hands. The ranch was the answer she had given when he had asked, and she had chosen the mountain man and not the shipping heir. And he could not have her anymore. So he was going to have the place instead. Prudence sat with it. She sat with it until she understood how big it was. Then she reached across the table. She put her hand on Fletcher's hand. She did not think about it. She did not decide. It happened. Her hand went across the wood and covered his knuckles. His hand was warm. It was still. He looked down. He looked at her hand on his. He did not move his hand. He did not turn it over. He did not clasp hers. He did not make it into more than what she had given. He just let her hand be there. Fletcher. Yes. This is not about the land. No. This is about her. Yes. He is coming for the place because he cannot come for her. Yes. He is going to lose. Yes, you know that. I know that because you are sitting at my table telling me. She did not know what to do with that. She left her hand where it was, another beat. Then she took it back. He did not stop her. He also did not pretend her hand had not been there. He got up. He put another log on the fire. He came back. He sat down. He said, "You will stay tonight." "I will." "There is a room." "I know. There are two rooms. There is the guest room, and there is—" He stopped. "There is the room I built, that I have not opened in 4 years." She looked at him. "Fletcher, I am not asking you to stay in that room. I am telling you it is there. That is all. I will take the guest room." "Yes. Thank you. Thank you." They did not speak of Blackthorn again that night. They spoke of small things. She asked him where he had learned to bake bread. He asked her how she had come to Cottonwood Bluff. She told him. A young husband, a promise of a homestead, a fever that ended the promise before it started, a widow who had decided to stay because leaving would have been the beginning of something worse than staying. He listened. He did not interrupt. He asked one question. He asked if she had been afraid. She said at first, then not afraid, then something else that was not fear, but that lived in fear's house. He nodded. He did not say he knew what she meant. He knew what she meant. He did not need to say it. She slept in the guest room. She slept badly. She woke twice. Once because a coyote called somewhere out on the ridge. Once because her body remembered that a man across the hall was awake and thinking about her and did not know what to do with the remembering. At first light, she came out to the kitchen. Fletcher had already made coffee. He set a cup in front of her without a word. She drank it. She rode home before the sun cleared the pass. The letter to Ezra Halbrook went out with the noon mail wagon. Then they waited. Waiting was what the next 2 weeks were. The days went on. She kept the healing room open. She saw patients. She set a broken finger. She treated a colicky infant. She sat up 2 nights with an old man named Reuben, who was dying of what old men die of, and she stayed with his wife until the dawn came, and Reuben was gone. Fletcher rode down every third day. I did not stay long. He never did. He came in the mornings. He brought firewood once. He brought oats for the mare twice. He brought a jar of honey from his own hives that she recognized from the first supper and accepted without comment. He sat at her table. He drank her coffee. He watched Jedediah build a fort out of chairs and blankets, and he did not tell Jedediah to be careful, and he did not tell Jedediah to stop because he was not that kind of man, and he had made his peace with the fact that a 9-year-old boy was going to build the fort whether or not it was structurally advisable. Wallace came sometimes. Wallace was different now. Wallace looked at her face. He looked at it every time he came in. He did not always smile, but he looked. And once when he thought no one was watching, he touched her sleeve as he walked past her chair. Just his fingertips. Just for a second. Then he was gone into the yard with Jedediah, and neither of them said anything about it. And Fletcher, who had been watching, did not say anything either. She said nothing either. But her chest hurt for a long time after Wallace's fingertips had left her sleeve. On the 12th day, a man showed up at the mercantile asking questions about her. She heard about it from Martha. Martha had come by to bring bread. Martha did not need to bring bread. Martha brought bread because Martha had decided she was going to bring bread now. And once Martha had decided a thing, the thing was decided. Prudence. Martha, there was a man at the store yesterday asking after you. Was there? He was not from here. I gathered. He was asking whether you were a licensed practitioner, which is a nonsense question. There is no license for a healer in this territory, and there never has been. He was asking whether you had ever been paid in cash. He was asking whether you had ever taken money from a patient in exchange for anything Tom Briggs might have considered irregular. Tom Briggs. Tom was in the store. He heard the whole thing. He told the man you were the finest healer in the territory, and if the man had a problem with that, he could take it up with the last 20 people you had kept alive. Bless Tom. Bless Tom. Also, the man wanted to know if you had ever been observed in a compromising position with Mr. Rowntree. Oh, that was the word, compromising. Well, prudence. What did Tom say? Tom told the man to go to hell, and then he went and got the sheriff. Bartholomew came and told the man to move along. The man moved along. Bartholomew described the man to me later so I could tell you. Bartholomew wants you to know. Oh? Yes, Bartholomew has your back. I know. Martha looked at her. Prudence, what is going on? Martha, I am not asking to gossip. I am asking because I want to help. What is going on? Prudence looked at her. She thought about it. She thought about how much a woman was allowed to trust another woman in a town where trust was traded like coin. She thought about 11 years of Martha bringing bread when bread was not needed. She thought about the fact that Martha was standing in her kitchen at 7 at night with the wind coming up outside and had not left even though the bread had been delivered and the visit was by any reasonable measure over. Over, sit it down, Martha. Martha sat. Prudence told her, not all of it. Enough of it. The lawyer, the debt, the land, Blackthorn, the contest filing on Fletcher's ranch. She left out Josephine. She left out Boston. Those were not hers to tell. Martha listened. Martha did not interrupt. At the end, Martha said, that miserable son of a... Martha, I did not say it. You said most of it. He is trying to buy you off your own future. That is what he is doing. Yes. Prudence, wait, yes. What can I do? Prudence looked at her. Watch the store, Martha. When strangers come in, watch who they talk to. Watch what they ask. Come tell me. That is all. Consider it done. Martha. Yes. Thank you. Do not thank me. Bring your children over Sunday for supper. Tom would like to see the boy. Jedediah owes him a chess game he lost fair and square last month and has been threatening rematch about ever since. Prudence's mouth moved, not a smile. Close. Martha left. The bread was on the counter. That night, 3 men stood in the street outside her healing room. She saw them from the upstairs window. She had gone up to put Jedediah to bed. She had put out the lamp. She had looked out the window because a wagon had passed, and she had heard it stop. The 3 men were standing across the street under the awning of the closed general store. They were not moving. They were watching her house. They had been there long enough that the light snow that had started an hour ago had begun to gather on their hats. She stepped back from the window. She did not turn on the lamp. She went down the back stairs. She went out the back door. She took the alley behind the row of houses. She came out onto Church Street 2 blocks up. She walked not fast, not slow to Sheriff Bartholomew Clay's house. Bartholomew answered in his stocking feet. Prudence. 3 men, in front of my house, watching. He did not ask another question. He put on his boots. He put on his coat. He took a lantern. He walked her home the long way. Except when they came out onto the main street, the 3 men were gone. There was snow where they had stood. There was a set of boot prints in it. 3 sets. The snow was undisturbed for 6 or 7 feet in every direction. They had been standing there. They had not left in a hurry. They had left when they saw Bartholomew coming, which meant they were watching the sheriff's house too, which meant this was going to get worse. Bartholomew looked at the boot prints. Bartholomew looked at her. Prudence, I am going to say this plain. Yes, you need to make a plan for your children. Somewhere they can go if this house is not safe. Not because I think this house will not be safe. Because if I turn out to be wrong, I do not want the wrong to cost me anything I cannot get back. Fletcher's ranch. I was going to say Martha's. Fletcher's ranch is 2 hours' ride. He has men. He has walls. He has a locked cabinet full of my husband's original papers and my letter and every piece of evidence I have collected in 2 weeks. If this is going to get worse, my children are safer up there than down here, and my papers are safer up there than down here, and I am safer up there than down here. I am going to send them up. Not yet, if it comes to it. All right. Bartholomew. Yes. Something else. What? She hesitated. She said it. There was a break-in at the Mercantile last night. Not the general store. The Mercantile. Behind the counter where the ledger is kept. I heard about it from Martha this morning. Nothing was taken. Nothing was disturbed. The ledger was put back where it was found. But the door had been forced. I heard about the door. Bartholomew, what is in the Mercantile ledger? Sales. Whose? Everyone's. Everyone in Cottonwood Bluff who buys on credit. Yes. Which includes Fletcher? Yes. Which includes the entries showing what Fletcher has bought over the last 12 years to build and maintain his ranch? Yes. She looked at Bartholomew. Bartholomew looked at her. They are building a picture, she said. Yes. They are going to argue Fletcher over-improved the property, that his boundary claim is inconsistent with the size of the improvements. They are going to try to use his own credit history against him. They cannot make that stick. They do not need to make it stick. They need to delay. Prudence. Bartholomew. Who has a key to that mercantile? Cornelius Wren, who owns it. Anyone else? His clerk. His clerk's name. Emery Alt. How long has Emery Alt worked at the mercantile? Bartholomew paused. 4 months. He came in from. He said Minnesota. Bartholomew. Yes. I think you need to have a conversation with Emery Alt. I think you may be right. They stood in the snow. The lantern was between them. The 3 sets of prints were around their feet. Prudence. Yes. You keep seeing things everybody else missed. I am not seeing things everybody missed, Bartholomew. I am seeing them because I have been made to look. Nobody else has been made to look. There is a difference. Prudence. Yes. You are going to be all right. I do not know yet. You are. She looked at him. Bartholomew. Yes. Go home. Get some sleep. I will get some sleep. Tomorrow morning, we will visit Emery Alt at the mercantile. Together. Before it opens. He nodded. He walked her to her door. He waited outside until he heard her turn the lock inside. She turned the lock. She stood with her back against the door. She closed her eyes. She heard something in the kitchen. Small. A rustle. She opened her eyes. Hattie was sitting at the kitchen table. Hattie had a lamp on. Hattie had a stack of papers in front of her. Hattie was going through the second box of old files, the one Prudence had asked her to sort a week ago, and that Hattie had been quietly working through one folder at a time whenever the healing room was empty. Hattie looked up. She did not say a word. She slid a piece of paper across the table. Prudence sat down. She picked up the paper. It was a general store receipt. Dated summer of '78. A man named Ezra Halbrook had bought provisions in Cottonwood Bluff. Under his name, he had written in the small, cramped hand of an old notary who was used to being precise his destination. Deadwood. Prudence had already sent Fletcher's letter to Deadwood. Fletcher had already written to Ezra Halbrook. But there was something else on the receipt. Something Prudence had not seen the first time Hattie had shown it to her. Something Hattie had gone back to check because Hattie was 12 and had decided a receipt did not give up all its information at once. Under Ezra Halbrook's name in the same cramped hand was a second name. The second name was crossed out, but the ink had not been thick enough to hide it. The second name was written as a companion, as a traveler with him. The second name was Josephine Rowntree. Josephine had ridden with Ezra Halbrook to Deadwood in the summer of '78. She had gone with him to notarize something, and she had not told her husband. Prudence looked at the receipt. She looked at her daughter. Hattie. Yes, Mama. How long have you been looking at this? Since yesterday. Why did you not show me yesterday? Because I wanted to be sure of the name. I went to Corwin at the telegraph office this morning and asked him to lend me the old customer log from '78, the one he keeps in the back. Nobody looks at it. He let me. I compared the handwriting. It is the same hand. Hattie. Mama. You are 12. Yes, Mama. You are 12 years old and you went to Corwin Bly and asked to see the customer log. Yes, Mama. Prudence looked at her daughter. Her daughter looked back. There was no expression on her daughter's face. There was only the small, readable pride her daughter allowed herself when her daughter had done something her daughter believed to have been necessary. Prudence reached across the table. She took her daughter's face in her hands. She kissed her forehead. She did not say anything. Hattie closed her eyes, just for a second. Then Hattie opened them and said, I made you tea. It is in the pot. Thank you, Hattie. Mama. Yes. You are going to write to Deadwood again. Yes. Tonight. Yes. I will bring you paper. Hattie brought her paper. Prudence wrote to Ezra Halbrook. She wrote to him the same night Fletcher was, without knowing it, sitting up at the ranch by his own kitchen table, writing his own second letter to the same man. Two letters, two houses, two people who had been carrying pieces of the same story without knowing they were carrying them. They were going to know soon. And so was Ezra Halbrook in Deadwood, sitting in his nephew's livery office, with his glasses on the end of his nose, reading two letters that had arrived on the same afternoon mail. He would read them. He would put them down. He would say to his nephew, "I am going to need my old notary book, the one from '78, and I am going to need a new envelope, a large one, because I am going to send some folks back what I have been holding for them." His nephew would look up. "Uncle, just get me the book, son." His nephew would go get the book, and Prudence Ashfield, 300 miles away, would blow out her lamp and go up the stairs to her cold bed at 2:30 in the morning and lie down without undressing because she was too tired to undress. She said into the dark without meaning to say it out loud, "Fletcher." She said it once. Nobody heard. She closed her eyes. The wind pushed at the eaves. The house held. Emery Alt broke before the coffee finished brewing. Bartholomew had brought him in at 6 in the morning. Not to the jail, to the sheriff's own kitchen. Bartholomew had learned a long time ago that a jail made a man remember he had rights. A kitchen made a man remember he had a mother. Prudence sat at the table. She did not speak. Bartholomew poured Emery a cup of coffee. Emery did not drink it. Emery looked at the coffee. He looked at the floor. He looked at Bartholomew's boots. "Emery, sheriff, you have 4 months here." "Yes, sir." "Where were you before?" "St. Paul." "Try again." "Chicago." "There it is." Emery did not say anything. "Emery, who is paying you?" "I do not." "Do not lie to me before breakfast, son. It is unkind." "Who is paying you?" "A man." "A man who works for?" "A man who works for a Mr. Draymore." Bartholomew nodded once, slow, sad, like a man confirming the fever he had suspected. "And what were you supposed to give them?" "Copies of the ledger." "Which entries?" "Roundtree. Anyone who does business with Roundtree, and her." He did not look at Prudence when he said her. She did not need him to. "Emery, sheriff, did you unlock any doors for anyone?" "No, sir." "Emery, no, sir. I swear it. They asked. They asked twice. I said no. I said no both times. I copied the pages. That is all I did. I know it is bad. I know. But I did not unlock a door." Bartholomew looked at Prudence. Prudence looked at Emery. Emery was 22. He had a thin face. He had the hands of a man who had grown up sorting pins in a haberdashery and had never done anything harder. He had been in Cottonwood Bluff 4 months, and he had taken money from Chicago because the money was there, and because a young man far from home who has been told he is clever will do a great deal of stupid before he learns what clever costs. She had seen this face before, on other men, not on this one, but on the shape of what this one was. "Emery." "Ma'am." "Look at me." He looked at her. "You have not helped them break anything. You have helped them see. That is bad. It is not the worst. Do you understand the difference?" "Yes, ma'am." "Do you want to be the man who helped them break something?" "No, ma'am." "Then you are going to help us." He blinked. "Ma'am, you are going to keep copying the ledger. You are going to keep giving them what they want. And you are going to tell Sheriff Clay every single time they contact you. Every letter, every man, every drop note, every whisper. You are going to be their eyes, and you are going to be our ears. And if you do that faithfully, and if you do not slip, then when this is over, you are not going to prison. You are going to be sent home to your mother in Chicago with a train ticket and no reputation attached. Is that acceptable?" Emery Alt began to weep. He did not sob. He was a young man in a sheriff's kitchen, and he had some pride left. But 2 large tears rolled down his face and hit the table. "Yes, ma'am." "Good." Bartholomew looked at her over the top of Emery's head. His expression was not a smile. It was a man's face when a man is watching another man be given a second chance. "Prudence." "Yes. You just built me an informant. I built you a young man with a chance to become the man his mother thought she raised." "Yes, Bartholomew. Yes." He goes back to work at 9. He acts normal. He tells them nothing about this conversation. He does his job. He sends us everything they send him. He does not deviate. Are we clear, Emery? Yes, ma'am. Then eat something. You have not eaten. There is bread on the counter. Emery ate. She watched him eat, because she had healed enough men to know the shape of one who was going to make it, and the shape of one who was going to break. And Emery Alt, sitting in Bartholomew Clay's kitchen at 7 in the morning with tears drying on his cheek and bread in his hand, was going to make it. She stood up. I have to go to the ranch. Now. Now. I have to tell Fletcher what we have. Prudence. Yes. Take one of my men, not because I think you will not make it, because if I am wrong, I do not want the wrong to cost me. You already said that once. I am saying it again. She took Deputy Halsey. He was 30, he was quiet. He rode 2 lengths behind her the whole way up Black Elk Pass and did not speak except to point out ice on the road once when the mare would have slid. Fletcher met her in the yard. I had not slept. She could see it. He had a letter in his hand. He was holding it the way a man holds a thing that has changed the whole day already before the day has properly begun. Prudence. You heard from Ezra. I heard from Ezra. So did I. Prudence. Fletcher. Inside. They went inside. The house was warm. He had built up the fire before dawn. He had made bread. He had made bread because that was what he did when he did not know what else to do with his hands. The kitchen smelled like it. He put his letter on the table. She put her letter on the table. 2 envelopes, 2 hands of writing, the same handwriting. Ezra Hallbrook in Deadwood, sitting in his nephew's livery office, had answered them both on the same afternoon and had put both letters in the same mail sack going south. Fletcher opened his first. She read over his shoulder. She did not ask permission. He did not ask her to move. They stood shoulder to shoulder at the table and they read. Ezra remembered. Ezra remembered the survey. He remembered every stake. He remembered the 2 witnesses. He remembered the ridgeline and the notch and the small creek that ran below the north pasture. He remembered because he had been a notary for 31 years, and he had trained his memory the way a blacksmith trains his hand. He had also kept his own book. He had every notation. He had every date. He would swear to any of it any day in any court before any man. He would also send certified copies of every page he held. Signed, sealed, dated, notarized by his own hand and countersigned by the notary in Deadwood. He would put them on the next stagecoach south. Fletcher's shoulders went down. Not much, just enough that she saw it. The tension he had been carrying like a load of rock across his upper back for 11 days released 1 inch. 1 inch was enough. 1 inch was the difference between a man who did not know if he could hold and a man who knew he could. She did not say anything. He said very quietly, that is the ranch. Yes. That is the ranch, Prudence. Yes. She opened her own letter. Ezra had answered every question. Yes, he had witnessed Fletcher's survey. Yes, he had kept his own records. Yes, he had also seen a woman named Josephine Roantree. He had seen her once. He had witnessed a document for her in the summer of '78. She had come to Deadwood alone. She had ridden up with him because he was going anyway, and she had asked for the escort. She had not told her husband. She had asked Ezra not to tell her husband. She had said she would tell him herself when the time was right. The time had not come. The fever had. Ezra had not spoken of it. It had not been his to speak of. He had held it for 4 years. And now, because she was asking, he was going to break his silence. The document she had signed was a private declaration, notarized, witnessed, filed with the office of a lawyer in Yankton for safekeeping, sealed to be opened only in the event of certain conditions. The conditions were her death, and after her death, the emergence of any legal claim against her husband's property arising from any party connected in any way to a man named Thurgood Blackthorne. The declaration named Blackthorne. The declaration named him as the man who had, in the years before her departure from Boston, subjected her to a course of harassment sufficient to require her family to obtain a private restraining letter from a Massachusetts judge. The declaration referenced the letter by date, by court, and by docket number. The declaration named the judge. The declaration named Blackthorne's father, who had at that time also been living, and who had prevailed on Blackthorne to leave Josephine alone. The declaration stated that the elder Blackthorne had been in failing health that spring. The declaration stated that Josephine, having read of the elder Blackthorne's decline in Boston papers, had understood that her 10 years of relative peace were likely at an end when the father was gone. The declaration had been drawn up and signed within the month. She had prepared this, not to save herself. She had already been chosen by Fletcher and had already borne his son and had already made her life on Black Elk Pass. She had prepared it because she was practical and because she knew a thing about the man who had once wanted to marry her, and because she wanted her son and her husband to have something to fight with if she was gone and the man came back. Which was what he had done, which was what she had known he would. Prudence set the letter down. Fletcher had gone very still beside her. Prudence. Fletcher. She knew. She knew. She left me a... She left you a weapon. He put his hand on the table. He splayed his fingers flat. He looked at his own hand as if he had never seen it before. Prudence. Fletcher. She did not tell me. No, she did not tell me because she was going to, when it mattered, and she did not have time, and she did not want to worry me for 4 years for a thing that might never come. Yes. Prudence. Yes. I did not know she was carrying this. She was carrying it. For me, for our son, she was. He stopped. He put his other hand on the table. He leaned on both hands. His shoulders were shaking once, twice. He was not crying. He was doing the thing he did when he would have been crying if he had been another man. She had seen it in the doorway of the church 3 weeks ago. She was seeing it now. She put her hand between his shoulder blades. Flat. Firm. She held it there. She did not speak. He did not move. They stood like that for 1 full minute. 2. Then he straightened. He wiped his face with the back of his hand. Not tears, but near enough to tears that the difference did not matter. Prudence. Yes. She was a good woman. I know. She was a very good woman. I know. You would have. He stopped. Fletcher, you would have liked her. She did not answer that. She could not answer that. She did not know what she would have felt about a woman she had never met and would never meet, who had built the kitchen she was standing in and had loved the man beside her and had made the boy who was somewhere in the yard right now with her own son. But she knew what she felt about the letter Ezra had sent. She felt gratitude. She felt quiet and steady gratitude to a dead woman for having thought ahead, for having refused to be helpless, for having in the year before she died sat down in a lawyer's office in Deadwood and prepared the tools her husband would need if the man from Boston ever came back. She felt like she had been handed something by a sister she had never met. She would carry it well. Fletcher. Yes. This is over. Yes. You know that. I know that because you are telling me. I am telling you. She looked at him. He looked at her. Neither of them moved. The kitchen was warm. The bread was cooling on the counter. Outside, a rooster called once. Wallace's laugh came through the window from somewhere near the barn. Fletcher, who had been standing an arm's length from her for 11 days, closed the distance by 1 step. Not to touch her, to be closer. That was all. She let him. Prudence. Fletcher. When this is done. Yes. When it is all done. Yes. I would like to say the thing I have not said. When it is done. When it is done. Yes. That was all they said. They did not need to say more. They packed the papers. Everything went. Fletcher's originals. Prudence's letter from Nathaniel. The certified copies from the Territorial Land Office. Ezra's letters. The receipt Hattie had found. The receipt Hattie had found again. Emery Alt's copied pages which Bartholomew had impounded that morning as evidence of the ongoing conspiracy. Everything in a single leather case that Fletcher had built himself 3 years ago, for reasons he had not been able to name at the time, but which turned out to be this. Emmett Kirkwood, United States Marshal for the District of Dakota, arrived in Cottonwood Bluff on Tuesday. He arrived on the noon coach from Yankton. He was a small man. He was narrow through the shoulders. He had a gray mustache and a gray eye and the general air of a man who had been surprised by very little in 23 years of federal service and did not expect to be surprised now. He surprised easily. He's surprised when Prudence in Bartholomew's office laid out on his desk a document trail that connected 4 territories, 6 shell companies, and 11 contested homesteads. He's surprised when he learned that a 12-year-old girl had contributed a second receipt to the chain of evidence by cross-referencing handwriting in a telegraph office log. He's surprised most when he read the sealed declaration Josephine Rowntree had made in 1878, which arrived by fast rider from Deadwood on Wednesday morning with Ezra Halbrook's countersignature on the outer envelope and his personal wax seal on the flap. Kirkwood held the declaration in his hand until his coffee cooled. Then he looked at Prudence. He looked at Fletcher. He looked at Bartholomew Clay. He said, "I have been trying to build a case against Thurgood Blackthorne for 2 years. He said, I did not have this. He said, I have it now. He said, nobody leaves town. He did not mean Prudence. He did not mean Fletcher. He meant that within 100 miles of Cottonwood Bluff, 7 men were about to be arrested inside 48 hours, and he did not want any of them warned in advance." He said it quietly, flatly. Then he stood up and put his hat on and walked out to find a room at Martha's boarding house. Prudence and Fletcher walked out together. Bartholomew stood in the doorway. He looked after them. He shook his head. "That woman," he said to no one in particular. He did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. That night, Draymore's men came for the papers. 2 of them. They came to the ranch. They came at 3 in the morning. They came up the back way along the creek, avoiding the yard. They came because Draymore had gotten word 2 days earlier from a certain young mercantile clerk that Fletcher's original documents had been consolidated at the ranch, and Draymore had made a decision. The decision was that the papers had to be destroyed. The decision was that if the papers were destroyed, the contest could still be salvaged, because Blackthorne's people could still argue in Yankton that Fletcher's boundary was undocumented and that the ranch had never had a valid original survey. They were wrong on all counts. They were wrong first because the papers were not at the ranch. Prudence and Fletcher had moved everything to a locked strongbox in the cellar of Doc Riley's clinic in Cottonwood Bluff 5 days ago, and only 4 people knew Prudence, Fletcher, Bartholomew, and Doc Riley. They were wrong second because Emery Alt had told Bartholomew about the plan on Sunday afternoon. They were wrong third because Bartholomew had put 4 men on the ranch since Monday. They came up the back way in the dark. They approached the cellar door. They started to work on the lock. The 4 men Bartholomew had placed there watched them from 4 different positions for 6 full minutes before Bartholomew's deputy Halsey stepped out from behind the smokehouse and said in a normal conversational voice, "You are under arrest." The 2 men ran. They did not get far. They were in irons within 90 seconds. Neither was armed with anything more than a crowbar and a small tin of coal oil. The coal oil was what mattered, because if they had gotten inside, they would have burned the cellar. If they had burned the cellar, they would have burned records that were not there. But that was not the point. The point was intent. The point was the tin of coal oil and the crowbar and the 2 men in the 3 in the morning. Kirkwood, who had been in Bartholomew's office since midnight, in a chair in the corner, drinking coffee and reading a 2-week-old newspaper, stood up when the news came in on the wire from the ranch. He said, "That is the arson conspiracy." He said, "That is my federal case." He said, "Wake up the judge." The judge was Wilburn Trask, and he lived 20 minutes' ride out of Cottonwood Bluff on a small hill overlooking the North Road. He was 71. He had been a territorial judge for 19 years. He was by common repute in 3 counties, incorruptible, humorless, and largely deaf. He was not deaf when they woke him. He listened to Kirkwood in his own parlor at 4:30 in the morning in his dressing gown and slippers, and he issued the warrants over hot coffee at 10 to 5. By 7 men had been arrested inside 100 miles. 2 of them at the ranch, 1 of them in Yankton, 1 of them at a rooming house in Bismarck. 1 of them, a certain lawyer named Percival Draymore, at a hotel 2 blocks from the Cottonwood Bluff train station where he had been about to catch the early train back east. And 1 of them on the platform at the Bismarck train station, boarding a Northern Pacific Express bound for Chicago via St. Paul, with a leather trunk beside him and a first-class ticket in his hand, and a slight smile on his face at the thought of the fresh winter in the east, and the wife he had never told anyone in Cottonwood Bluff he had waiting for him in a townhouse on Prairie Avenue. Thurgood Blackthorne. He was not smiling when the deputies came. He was not smiling at all. He looked at his ticket. He looked at his trunk. He looked at the two men in dark coats who had walked up to him from either side. He said softly, "I would like to speak to my attorney." The deputies said, "Which one?" He did not answer. I was taken off the platform at 7:12 in the morning in front of 11 Bismarck passengers and one drowsy conductor and put into a coach and driven directly to Yankton, where he would spend the rest of the day and every day for the coming years being asked questions. Percival Draymore was at that same hour sitting in a small holding room at the Cottonwood Bluff train station with Bartholomew Clay across the table. Draymore had not asked for his attorney. Draymore had instead held Bartholomew's eyes across the table until the sheriff had to look away first and had said, "I would like to speak to Mrs. Ashfield." Bartholomew said no. Draymore said, "Please." Bartholomew studied him. Bartholomew said, "Why?" Draymore said, "Because I am going to prison for a considerable time, Sheriff. I know that. I am not fool enough to pretend otherwise. Marshal Kirkwood is going to want everything I know. I am going to give it to him. But before I do, I would like 5 minutes with your Mrs. Ashfield, she and I, in this room, with you standing by the door." Bartholomew studied him another beat. Then he said, "Wait here." He came and got Prudence. She was in Doc Riley's clinic. She was still in her coat. She had not slept. She had ridden down from the ranch at 4:30 in the morning with the news of the arrests and had come straight to Doc Riley's cellar to make sure the papers were where they were supposed to be and to sit for 1 hour with the strongbox and let the enormity of the last 12 hours settle in her chest. Bartholomew found her there. He told her Draymore was asking. She thought. She said yes. She walked with Bartholomew to the train station. It was 9:10. The town was up. The town was in fact very much up. There had been arrests on the platform. There had been arrests at the boarding house. There was gossip going door to door faster than gossip usually went. Martha Henley was at the general store, and she had already decided that Prudence Ashfield had single-handedly saved Cottonwood Bluff from something the town had not known it needed saving from, and Martha was going to spread that opinion as far and as fast as opinion would go. Prudence walked into the holding room. Draymore stood. She said, "Sit down." He sat down. She sat across from him. Bartholomew stood at the door. Draymore looked at her. He said, "Mrs. Ashfield." She said, "Mr. Draymore." He said, "I underestimated you." She said, "Yes." He said, "That was my error. It was not the first time in my career I have made it. It is the last." She said, "Are you asking for something?" He said, "No." He said, "I am giving you something." He said, "There are 4 other territories." She said, "Kirkwood knows." He said, "Kirkwood does not know all of it. Kirkwood knows the properties. Kirkwood knows the shell companies. Kirkwood does not know the network. Kirkwood does not know the 2 Chicago banks that funded it. Kirkwood does not know the accountant. Kirkwood does not know the man who forged the Meridian Holdings signatures. And Kirkwood does not know the name of the woman in New Orleans who has been receiving 1/3 of the profits from every property Blackthorne has taken in 5 years." She said, "Why are you telling me?" He said, "Because I am going to tell Kirkwood, and I want you to know that when I tell him, I am telling him because you did not accept the offer I made you in your healing room. I want you to know I am telling him for that reason. That is the only thing I am giving you today, Mrs. Ashfield. It is small, I know, but I would like you to have it." She looked at him. She said, "Mr. Draymore." He said, "Yes." She said, "You are not a redeemed man. You are a caught man." He said, "Yes." She said, "But a caught man who talks is a better man than a caught man who does not. That is all I will say." He said, "Thank you." She stood up. She looked at him with the plain, unornamented look she had been using on people for 36 years. She said, "Mr. Draymore." He said, "Yes." She said, "Your mother is alive." He said, "How did?" She said, "I asked Corwin to wire St. Louis last Wednesday. Your mother is alive. She lives in a small house on Chouteau Avenue. She has been asking after you for a decade. She has never known what you have been doing." His face did not move. His hands did. His hands went to the top of the table. They pressed flat. They did not shake. They pressed. She said, "When you are done telling Kirkwood what you know, you may consider whether you would like to write to her." She said, "That is all." She left. She walked out and let Bartholomew close the door behind her. She walked out to the street. She stood in the cold. The sky was gray. The snow that had come the night before was already melting on the boards of the platform. Somewhere down the street, a child was banging a stick against a fence. Bartholomew came out. He said, "Prudence." She said, "Yes." He said, "What did you say to him at the end?" She said, "I told him his mother was alive." Bartholomew was quiet a beat. Bartholomew said, "That is worse than prison." She said, "It is." She said, "It is not meant to be worse. It is meant to be a door. He can choose to walk through it, or he can choose not to. That is not my part." Bartholomew looked at her. Bartholomew said, "You are a strange woman, Prudence Ashfield." She said, "I know." She said, "Come on. There is a great deal still to do." The coroner's inquest was held in the Cottonwood Bluff Grange Hall on the 11th of April. 6 men sat as jurors. They were middle-aged men. They were town men. They were Corwin Bly, the telegraph clerk, and Tom Briggs, the freighter, and Reuben Wick, the farrier, and Endicott Cash, the schoolmaster, and Amos Threlford, the postmaster, and Bartholomew's older brother Uriah Clay, who had come in from his own farm 2 counties over for the occasion. They heard evidence for 4 days. They heard from Fletcher. They heard from Prudence. They heard from Bartholomew. They heard the wire from Kirkwood and Yankton. They heard the deposition of Percival Draymore, which had been taken over 3 long days, and which named names, dates, and dollar amounts across 4 territories, with the completeness of a man who had decided that if he was going to burn, he was going to burn hot. They heard the deposition of Emery Alt, who wept twice, and finished his testimony with his back straight. They heard from Ezra Halbrook, who had ridden down from Deadwood personally and who had brought his old notary book with him and had turned the pages under Judge Trask's own eye. They heard the sealed declaration of Josephine Rowntree, which was read aloud by the court clerk, and which the courtroom heard without a single sound of movement or breath for the entire 7 minutes it took to read. They deliberated for 1 hour. They returned a finding of fraud, forgery, conspiracy to commit arson and mail fraud across state and territory lines against Thurgood Blackthorne, Percival Draymore, and 5 named associates. The federal charges would be pursued in Yankton in the fall term. The territorial charges would be pursued immediately. The contest filing against Fletcher Rowntree's ranch was dismissed with prejudice at the close of the same afternoon. The Nathaniel Ashfield debt was declared a fraudulent instrument void from its origin on the grounds that Blackthorne had, from the moment of the loan's issuance, intended to use the loan to construct a claim against adjoining land. Prudence Ashfield's ownership of the parcel east of Cottonwood Bluff, adjoining Fletcher Rowntree's ranch, was affirmed. The court clerk stamped the deed and put it in her hand. She stood in the Grange Hall holding the deed. She was 36 years old. She was a widow. She had 2 children. She had a healing room. And she was, for the first time in her life, a landowner in her own name. She looked at Fletcher. Fletcher looked at her. Fletcher said in a voice only she could hear, "You did that." She said in a voice only he could hear, "We did that." They rode home together. The wedding was on the 17th of May. It was a Saturday. The church at Cottonwood Bluff was small. It sat 40 when it sat comfortably and 60 when it did not. And on the 17th of May, it sat 112, because the whole town had come, and half the ranches on the pass had come, and Corwin Bly had come in a shirt he had not worn since 1869. And Martha Henley cried 3 separate times before the service began, and Bartholomew Clay stood at the back with his arms crossed, and looked like a man who considered himself responsible for none of this, and was very pleased about how it had turned out. Ezra Halbrook had come down from Deadwood for the occasion. He sat in the second row. He had brought a wedding gift wrapped in brown paper. It was heavy. Prudence would open it later and find inside his old notary book, the one from '78. He had inscribed the flyleaf in his tight, small hand. It said, "For the woman who used it well." Prudence walked down the aisle alone. She had thought about it for 2 weeks. She had considered Bartholomew. She had considered Corwin. She had considered for 1 whole afternoon asking Wallace, and had decided against it because it would have been too heavy a thing to ask of a boy of 10. In the end, she had decided she would walk alone. She had walked alone for 5 years. She was not going to be given away today by any hand but her own. That was the plain fact. That was what her walk down the aisle would say. That was what she wanted it to say. She walked. Hattie walked ahead of her. Hattie was 13 years old on that day because Hattie's birthday had been 3 weeks earlier, and she had grown 2 inches in the winter, and she was starting to look like the woman she was going to be. She was carrying a small posy of pale roses. They were the last of Josephine's rose bushes from behind the ranch house, coaxed by Hattie herself from her mother's careful pruning and Wallace's daily watering into their first bloom of the season. Hattie carried them with the seriousness of a girl who understood what she was carrying. Prudence followed her. Prudence was in a dress the color of a river in evening. She had not worn black. She had not worn Sunday gray. She had let Martha make her a dress, and Martha had chosen the color, and Martha had been right. Fletcher stood at the front of the church. Wallace stood beside him. Wallace was 10. Wallace had grown too. Wallace was wearing a coat that fit him for once. He was standing with his hands at his sides and his chin lifted and his eyes on Prudence from the moment she stepped through the door. She walked to them. She did not look at anyone else. She only looked at them. Fletcher's face was still, except the eyes. The eyes were not still at all. She reached the front. She stopped. Wallace did a small thing then that nobody in Cottonwood Bluff would ever forget who saw it. He stepped forward. He took the posy from Hattie. He held it a moment. Then he turned to Prudence and held the posy out to her. And when she took it, he said in the small, clear voice he had begun to grow into, "Welcome home, ma'am." The church did not make a sound. Prudence held her breath. She had decided she would. She held Wallace's shoulder for 1 second. She said very quietly, "Thank you, son." He went to stand by his father. The minister spoke. The words were the ordinary words. Prudence had heard them at other weddings. What made them extraordinary today was the two people saying them, and the two children standing at either side, and the town watching, and the fact that the whole thing had almost not happened at all. At the end, the minister said the sentence. Fletcher took Prudence's face in his large hands. He kissed her. He kissed her the way he did everything that mattered. Careful, slow, absolutely certain. She kissed him back. Cottonwood Bluff, which had underestimated Prudence Ashfield for 11 years, did not underestimate her anymore. A year passed. It was May again. The garden Nathaniel had 6 years earlier borrowed money to buy for a wife he loved was now planted. The parcel east of Cottonwood Bluff, adjoining Fletcher's ranch, had been folded into the ranch by a simple bit of survey and a stone marker that both Fletcher and Prudence had placed by hand on a windy afternoon the previous fall. The two pieces of land were now one. There was no fence between them anymore. There would never be one. The rose bushes Josephine had planted 12 years earlier along the south wall of the ranch house had bloomed in April. They had bloomed harder than they had in years because Hattie had over the winter read every book she could find on the pruning of roses and had gone out in March with a small pair of shears and had done what needed to be done. Prudence had watched her from the porch and had said nothing because Hattie did not want to be watched. And Prudence had learned in a year of living with a stepson who did not want to be watched either how to be present without being seen. Wallace was 11. Wallace was on this particular morning in May, sitting on the porch reading aloud from a book of poetry he had checked out of the library in Bismarck the last time Fletcher had taken him. He was reading to Jedediah, who was 10 now and who was sprawled on the porch boards with his chin in his hands and his eyes on the horizon and his ears entirely on his brother. Because that was what Wallace was to Jedediah now. Brother. It had happened without ceremony. It had happened over the course of 100 small moments across a whole year of shared meals and shared chores and shared arguments. It had happened at some particular Tuesday last September when Jedediah had without thinking called Wallace his brother in front of a farmhand, and Wallace had not corrected him, and Wallace had, from that day forward, when introducing Jedediah to any stranger, said, "This is my brother." Fletcher and Prudence had not commented. They had not needed to. Hattie was in the kitchen garden with her father. Her father, she called him that now. She had started tentatively in November. She had said it once and had waited to see if the word broke anything. It had not. She had said it again in December. It had become natural by January. By March, it was simply what she called him. Fletcher, on the first day, Hattie had called him. Father had come inside from the barn and had put his forehead against the kitchen wall and had stood there a full minute and had not moved and had not said anything. And Prudence, who had been kneading bread at the table, had put down the dough and had gone to him and had put her hand on his back, the way she had put her hand on his back 3 weeks after they met, and had stood there with him until he was ready to turn around. He had turned around. He had said in a rough voice, I did not know a word could do that. She had said, I know. He had said, I did not know. She had said, you do now. He had put his arms around her and she had put her arms around him, and neither of them had said anything else for a while. That had been in November. It was May. Prudence stood at the edge of the garden. She was watching Fletcher and Hattie plant tomato starts. Fletcher was holding the seedlings. Hattie was digging the holes. She was directing him. He was accepting direction. He had, over the course of a year, learned that his stepdaughter had the mind of a small, precise engineer, and that when she was engaged in a project, the wisest course was to hold the seedlings and take the direction and be grateful he had been invited to participate. How was grateful? Prudence watched them. The wind moved through the pines above the pass. The rose bushes along the south wall were opening. The porch was warm in the sun. Wallace's voice was reading a poem she did not know, but which she was going to look up later. Fletcher looked up. He saw her watching. He did not wave. He did not smile. He did what he always did when he saw her watching. He put his hand flat against his chest for 1 second. It was a small motion. It was the closest thing he had to a gesture of pure love. She did it back. She turned toward the house. Inside, on the kitchen wall above the stove, where the light from the east window caught it every morning, hung a small framed object. It had been framed by the man who ran the print shop in Bismarck. He had done it for free because Prudence had 3 months before sat up 2 nights with his wife through a hard birth, and he had told her she could bring him anything she liked, and he would frame it. She had brought him a coin, a 2-cent piece, worn thin at the eagle's wing. He had framed it. It hung above the stove. It caught the morning light. It was not there to remind her of the cold. It was there to remind her of the shadow that had fallen over her in the mud in January of '82. The shadow of a man who had taken off his hat and had said 4 words. The 4 words that had begun everything. I choose you, ma'am. She stood in her kitchen. She was 37 years old. She was at last chosen. She was at last home. Outside in the garden, Fletcher laughed at something Hattie said. The sound came in through the open door. Prudence's mouth moved, fully this time, a whole smile. She turned to the counter. She had bread to make. She began to make it. Her hands moved the way her hands had always moved. Steady, sure. The hands of a woman who had rebuilt a life from nothing and who had, when the moment came, been ready. The wind moved through the pines. The house held. The living at last could begin.